Welcome to another Rails Hive episode. Today we're going to go over test data. Before we get started, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any episodes. If you like this episode and want to see more like this one, don't forget to smash that like button. With that said, let's get started. Whether you're testing the front end or back end of your application, you'll need to create test data. Test data helps to ensure that our code works and our application looks the way we expect it to. A great example is when the front end developer creates a mockup of a website that has placeholder images, dummy data, so that the client can get a good sense of how the application should look. As a full stack developer, we need to verify that our code is doing what we expect it to do on the back end and the front end. And where else we can do this by using the Seeder file to generate our test data. The Seeder file is automatically generated whenever you create a Rails application inside of your DB directory. That file automatically comes up with an example of a movie's uh, model, and you need to create it within an array of hashes. So each hash is a new record that gets created within your application.
Okay, the first thing we're going to do is remove this test data. Instead, we're going to create a user model. So you can do that by entering Rails G model, pass in user as the model, and then you can enter in your attributes. In my case, I'm going to use email as a string, name as a string, and password as a string. Click on enter. All right, so you can see in your models directory that there's a user model created now. We also have a migration file, and there are a couple of files created in the test as well. But the one we're interested right now in is the migration. We just want to make sure that everything looks correct. We have email as a string, name as a string, and password as a string. So everything looks good. Now we just have to do a Rails DB migrate. All right, so those files are now migrated. So we can go to our Seeder file now. So the first thing we're going to do is basically similar to the example we had for the movies, where we're going to use user create, and we're going to pass in an array of hashes. So each hash is going to have a different record. So we have one for John Doe, email address, name, and password, and we have one for Jane Doe, same information as well. All right, so what I like to do whenever I generate the Seeder data is to actually print out information just to make sure that everything went through successfully. So in this case, I'm going to get all the users that were created, and then I go to pluck, which just means select the name. So it will bring back the names for all of the users. And once I have that information, I'm just going to use a put to add that information to the terminal so that I can view it and just confirm that everything went through successfully. All right, so now that we have that in there, let me just click on save. Yes, overwrite. All right, so now we just have to do Rails DB seed. All right, we can see that it created the two users. We have John Doe and Jane Doe. All right, so that's one way to create test data for your site. But as you can see, we do have this information duplicated. You know, you see the email, name, and password. There's a more simpler way to do this. So let's do a little bit of refactoring so that we can try to get our code to be more dry. All right, so what I'm going to do is create an array of users. In my case, I have Peter Parker and Mary Jane. So from there, I can look at each statement and go through each item within this array, which is going to be a name. And then I can just use the name and G sub out the space in order to do Peter Parker with no space at test.com. And then for the name, I can just pass in that name, Peter Parker, and then just use passwords since we're using them both for both of the users above. So just by doing this, it should create both of the users without any problems. So let's go ahead and comment out our old test. Let me save that. And let's run a Seeder again. This time it should come up as Peter Parker. There we go. You have Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and it brought back the other two users that were already created. All right. Now this is nice, but let's say you have another record that you need to create for another model, right? And you don't want to have to enter in a whole list of names. So there's a way to do that, and Rails provides it. It's called Faker. So the Faker gem, you can use that in order to create that test data. So let's get started with that. Okay, this looks good, but what if you want to create 100 users? You don't want to have to enter in 100 names or come up with 100 names just to add to this list. So there is a way in Rails. There's a gem called Faker, and with Faker you can automatically generate dummy data for your application. So the way to add in Faker is to go to your gem file, and I like to put things that I'm using for testing in my development in the test group. So let's just add in that Faker gem there. So let's just gem Faker, and then this is just the version. All right, so once we have it in there, we just have to save the file and just run bundle install. All right, it's installed now. So let's go back to the Cedar file. So instead of using what we have right now, we can go ahead and comment this out. And instead, we can do 100 times do and then do a create. And the way that you use Faker is you can pass in Faker and then whichever attributes go for it. So in this case, it'll be internet email, it'll be name, and internet password. So by using this, it should create 100 users. But in our case, we already have 4. So when we print it out, it's going to say 104. So rather than get a name, because we don't want to use this now, let me go ahead and put that up here and comment that out as well. All right, so we can instead just use it at all and then use count. And then we can just pass in count here. All right. So now if we run it, we should return back with 104. Let me just type it in. Voila, created the users 104. All right, so that's it. That's all we had to do, and now we have 104 users. So this is a great way to refactor it. I recommend using Faker. And it saves you some time. You don't have to think about it, and it can just create the data for you. And instead, if you need specific information, so if you have something specific, then I recommend going this route when you're using an array and just eating through it in order to create that data. But let me know if you have any questions. Of course, leave it in the comments. But if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you saw, and if you want to see more things like this. All right, thanks. Bye.